In this video help, I'm going to be covering the appointment portion of the screen and how to set up appointments. Let's go ahead and show you that there is a video help right here that you can click on that will run the video to explain how we did this video help. Let's go ahead and start out by clicking on the plus sign. And what the plus sign is going to do, it's going to create a new appointment. Before we do that though, let's cover what's already in here. Let's look at an existing screen where we have all the information provided in it to make it simpler. We can either click on this blue or green arrow here or click on the name to access that screen. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to bring the screen up so we can look at it. On this screen, it looks fairly simple as far as the information is concerned, and actually it is. When you create a new appointment, the appointment can be for any kind of activity that you're doing in relations to the tasks that you have to do for this customer. When you go in, I have a regime here that I have set up so that you can see it, but you can do whatever you like to see how it works. For example, I say put in the customer's name and then go ahead and put in the type of appointment. And for example, this might be any one of the following items. And by the way, in the custom design, these can be changed and you can request whatever you want in this pop-up. In this particular case, I have an action item. An action item is something that you have to do for this client, or you're assigning an action item to somebody else and you're going to track it. A call would be where you're going to do an initial call, maybe even a cold call, or you're doing a callback that's related to some transaction or task that you're doing currently. Escrow is if you're going into escrow and you're doing a number of tasks on the escrow. This would give you the escrow in the appointment title so that you'd know what you're doing. The inspection, either you're assigning an inspection to a company or you're doing it yourself as an inspection company. The next one is listing, where you're actually taking a listing either as a seller or the real estate broker itself is putting in a new listing. Meetings are meetings that you may have with your internal employees or in obvious case, either a listing or a buyer or another meeting that's related to a piece of property, either with the escrow company or some title company or something like that. Paperwork is when you're doing paperwork for a specific client that's due and you need to get paperwork done. A reminder is something that you're going to go out and you're going to either remind the client of something, or it's a reminder for yourself that you need to do something. So you can assign an appointment to yourself to do certain things. Sales is where you're doing sales and you're taking information in on prospective customers, or you get a call that's a query about a piece of property and you want to keep all the information so you can follow up on that particular sales opportunity. And then showing a property, where you're going out and you're going to do a showing for a particular customer, or you're going to do a pre-showing where you're going to go out and look at the property prior to the actual showing in order to give a walk around yourself and understand what the property is about. Now, to fill us in, you would have put the type of appointment we just covered. You can go ahead and set the low, medium, or high priority as far as this is concerned on the screen. And these show up, and also the icon and the name will show up on the screen along with the title on the appointment screen. The next thing you're going to see is the start date and finish date. The start date and finish date is if it's a one-day appointment and you want to track the times for open and closing for the calendar to know when you're supposed to be and when you're supposed to be done. As far as the appointment is concerned, you would put in the times along with the current date. If you put a date range in where this is something like an escrow or title or something that's going over a period of time, what you would do is put the start date. You can ignore the times because they're not going to be shown, but I would put them in only so that they show up on the calendar when you click on the pop-up maintenance part of it where you can see the data. For example, you may have to have it done at a specific time by a certain time on a certain date, and that would be the next date. So if I say, for example, had 9/22 and the escrow is supposed to take paperwork-wise, or the full escrow is supposed to take X amount of time, I would put that time or date in here and a time. These are not mandatory when you do a date range, but it's nice to have them in there anyhow. This is assigned by the person that actually created the particular task or appointment that would be shown in here. If you had Joe Realtor and you were logged in as Joe Realtor, then that would show up here. If you had another calendar and you logged in with that, that would show who actually created the appointment. Now, if you had a number of different people that are, or calendars that are in here, whatever calendars you wanted this information to show up on, you would put an X in here. And for example, if I wanted Joe Calendar to be on this, I would go ahead and do that. And I would say make sure that that was in there so you would have that information available to them. Okay, the next thing I want to show you is that when you're at this point, this is the base calendar information that should be on the appointment. Up here, if you're completing the appointment, you would go ahead and put a check in here to complete the appointment. If you're going to delete it for some reason, say for example, the person changed their mind and this is not going to be an appointment and they're going to say they're never going to come back, you could say you could delete this. But I recommend that anytime you put an appointment in, keep it. Do not get rid of it, because there may be an occurrence or something that happens where you need to follow up and find that information. Especially on real type of transactions where you're doing actual work, do not delete them. This is only an alternative in case you did something wrong and put the wrong information in and want to just delete it without saving it. This is the important part of setting up the next step. This application has two sides to it. It has the advanced calendar side and it has the back end where the CRM, the inspections, and all the realty information is available. Now, in this particular application, the way this would work is that when you're setting up an appointment, you're going to have access to a lot of the information that is on the back side of the calendar or as the back part of the application. But in order to have that information available and useful to you, you have to create the user before you can actually add information to it. So if I click on here, I have 3 sample people that I created here. You would be writing these records over when you get to the back of the application where you're going to replace the information I have put in there and put your own information in there as far as your own clients. Now you can import information if you have it on an Excel spreadsheet into the back end of the application to populate all your past client information. I can help you as a developer to do that. It's not that difficult, but it does take some special kind of understanding of how to import. And I can indicate that I can show you how to do that if you want to do it in the future. Okay, once you've selected somebody, each time you select a different person, say I come in and I do an appointment for John Smith, or in this case, Mary Smith, let's say, and I switch to Mary Smith, you're going to automatically see that things are going to change. I am now looking at Smith's record on the back end of the application in the CRM area, and it's providing me with the name and the address. And in this case, this is record ID number 1. This is the linking file number ID to keep all the relational information together for this particular person. Now, I'm going to cover these in just a second, but basically what this does is it sets whoever this record belongs to, and you're doing the data for this particular person. You want to have their record in here. Now, don't switch it after you set it up because it's matching whoever you put in here. These are called UDF fields. Now, in the process of building an application, there's always fields that I don't think of that you may need to have, and they're related to specific things, the way you track information. In this case, you could put a title for a field and then put the information that is in the input side of the field in order to put that in here. There are 3 fields wide and an infinite number of UDF fields for this particular client. Now, this client information that you're seeing here is actually on the CRM side of the application. Even though it's shown in the calendar appointment area, you're actually doing live data on the back end of the application for Mary Smith. Okay, so knowing that, let's go ahead and I'm going to change back to where I was at because I have some additional information to show you. If you're doing a property showing and the information that you've already created, you have a client now, you can click on property showing, which is actually on the back end of the application. And what it's going to do, it's going to do 2 things. It's going to provide you the base information for the client that you're working with, and then the property that you're actually showing. And in this particular case, this is the property showing information up here, and this is additional information down here about this client that you're talking about up here. So if you needed to in the calendar to see information about this particular customer, you could actually look at what showings you've done. And if you'll notice there's a scroller here, you can have as many showings for this client as you want to. And they're related to this client's properties that they have viewed and viewed as far as going out and doing an actual walkthrough of the property. So you can assign and set up a date for the appointment, a time for the appointment, and you can do a status as far as the appointment is concerned. These are drop downs that give you the option to go ahead and add information into these. There also is a text area here where you can type in information, and you can put in here who actually, or what you did as far as showing it, the name of the people who are being shown the property. Now, when you have a primary client, like one name up here, it might be his spouse, so you might want to put in the spouse that's also in there. And if they had children, go ahead and put the children in there as well. The property information itself is picked based on a drop down, and this is the drop down where you can pick the property for that particular showing. And then you can do the rest of the setup as far as this is concerned. When you pick the property itself, as far as the showing is concerned, if I click on it, is actually going to drop the detail information. But what's going to happen is you just enter the showing information for this particular showing for that same property. Now, one of the things that will happen on the back end of the application, you're going to be able to see who else has or have you shown this property before to somebody else, and your detailed description of the property and your showing notes. So if you had showing notes in here and they were going through and they had things that they didn't like about the property, you could take those notes and put them in this area here so you could recall some of the objections that they had about that particular property. So you can see how that pertains to the next showing and the one after that if you have to do multiple showings. Obviously, in this case, it'd be city, and in some cases, in some locations, they actually have a township, like in some of the states or overseas in Europe, and or a state or province. Now, all this information is over on this basic site over here is based on a listing that you create on the back end of the application. And basically, once you come into this screen on this side, you're putting in the actual person that you're showing stuff for. This is already created in the listing, and this is created at the time of the showing. So there's a couple of areas right here. They're separated from one another. Now, with this particular information, also you can put down notes that are general about the client, that are notes about the client and not the property that you're viewing. You can also put a status for the different issues as far as this client is concerned. And if you require a follow-up for this particular listing or whatever you've done as far as a showing, this would be the next event that you may want to be taking. For example, they went out and looked at a couple of houses, and now there's a thing where you put a note in here saying that you need to go back and do something about that particular viewing. The property notes down here are related just to this client, where you're putting in their likes and dislikes about the property. For example, if they want a home with a pool, they want at least 2,000 square feet, they want blah, 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 blah. That would be in here, so that as you're building the information for the client, you would have that information. The source of how this client was actually brought in, you could type in there one of the many things or ways that a client either cold calls, show, or a referral, or what it might be. If you actually sell this client a property, you could put the yes, or if they didn't buy anything, you can check it with a no. This is more CRM stuff where the people that are related to this particular transaction, you take their birthday and anniversary, and in this case, if they've had an inspection and have been into it, you could put the last inspection date where there was an actual inspection done on a piece of property if they were trying to bring something into escrow. So you can see really quickly if they've already had an inspection or not. In this particular case, also having the information here is great sales background information, that once this customer is your customer and you're in the business for a number of years, you're going to be able to go out and send cards out saying, happy birthday or happy anniversary to these folks. Keep in front of them so that if they want to refer somebody to you as being a valuable realtor, you're going to have that information. And or, for example, if you're an inspection person, this is not always the best information for you, but it could be very useful as far as following up with clients on certain dates, for example, like birthdays and anniversaries. Okay, this particular dialog that you see is called a popover. When you click on the button itself or click on a white space, it'll disappear. Let's go ahead and click on the next items that are here. I have activity track. Activity track is from the back end of the application where as you do an activity that's based on what we did on this side and you want to document it for the CRM portion on the back end of the application, you would go ahead and put the information that is similar to what you have in the appointment so you can keep track on the back end of the application all the different things that you've done for this client that were related to activities. Now, activities could be anything that's related to some ambiguous task, a telephone call, an email, or sending out a brochure, or sending out information as far as a listing in an email so that they might have interest in that listing. This is an activity. Now, the next thing we're going to be looking at, and by the way, on the back end of the application, if you click on these icons, not up here because we don't leave this screen, I'll explain that in a minute. If you click on this, it'll take you to a form that can be printed. That way, if you needed to, you could give something to a broker or another realtor that may be helping you to do a showing or whatever that has information that pertains to this particular client. In this case, it would be an activity report that you could send to them with them and the information based on each activity that you've done. Or in the case of, let's go to the next thing, a meeting, where if you wanted to have meeting notes and you had agenda items that you covered during a meeting with that client that you wanted to take care of, who was at the meeting as far as the spouse, the agent, whoever, or the spouse and the buyers, or meeting notes in general, discussions that you had and information about the transactions or why you were at the meeting. This could include when you're writing up a offer and you're doing the offer that you want to keep track of the offer information, any questions or objections they may have during that period for that meeting. This is where it's so valuable to have something like an iPad where you can jot down this information during the process as you're talking to the person so you don't forget those things. That's why CRM is so proactive, because you have all the information that's related to anything that you're covering. Now up here you'd show the date, the time, and the actual meeting location and a basic description of what you're going to be covering. This icon here, when you're in the back end of the application, would show the form. If for some reason you wanted to give a copy of the meeting notes to the customer, you could do that by clicking this and then printing a form that's an 8.5 by 11 page for the customer. The last thing we're going to cover in this particular screen is the action items. Action items are things that you need to either do yourself or to give to somebody else to do something. It might be something where you have a title company, escrow company, an inspection company, or an inspector gave you some kind of information back that you needed to follow up as an action item, and it's important for you to follow up. You'd put it into the action items and you give yourself the action person, or you would assign it to somebody as far as an action is concerned. So for example, if you had, for example, done a scheduled an inspection and there was some reason why you needed to have this sent out as an action item to somebody, you could go ahead and create the action item. The action person would be whoever you're going to send it to, and the expected start date and completion date of that particular action. There are reports where you can run this and you can see all the action items, all the activities, all the meetings in reports, so you can see what is actually due and what needs to be done. And that way you can also look in your calendar and also follow up on these on your calendar. One end of the application is supports the other side, and the CRM portion is the Bible information of everything, where the calendar is your reference as to things that have to happen at specific dates and times. Now, as I said before, if you haven't, by the way, as you're leaving this screen, the only way to access or exit this screen is to click the close box. And the reason for that is it will save all the information you just edited on this portion of the screen here. These are all saved. All these edits in here and here are saved as you make those different edits. But this portion up here needs to have you save it. Now, like I was saying before, if you wanted to create a new appointment, Creating the new one actually brings up the same screen, only it's named a little different. It will say new appointment as opposed to edit appointment at the top of the screen. When it says new appointment, you're adding the basic information. You have all the same different information I showed you, but as you complete it, it would not come back to the new appointment screen in the next opportunity. If you clicked on something, it would go to the edit appointment screen. Now you can show these complete in here, and I'll show you that when you do click on it, it draws a line through the item as you complete them, so that when you don't have any expired appointments, you want to make sure that you do click on it and make sure you have a check in the checkbox after you complete those. That way you can also view the screen and see everything that you've completed for the day, and if you have things that are not completed from a prior day and you want to go back and view those, you could do that. The same thing pertains if you have an activity meeting or an action item. On the back end of the application, you can bring up a report and see everything that is still due that you have not completed. Okay, if you have any questions, you can always go to the FAQ section of the support site at ontargetsolutions.biz and go to the FAQs and go ahead and ask a question, and I'll contact you as soon as I get your email. Thank you.